I want to talk about a particular phenomena that is both a form of protection and kind of comes under the domain of unlovability. And I want to begin by outlining the law of mass. The law of mass says that when a bowling ball collides with a pinball, and they're both traveling in the opposite direction, it's not a mystery what happens, right? Bowling ball, heavy mass, pinball, dense mass, but the bowling ball is bigger. And so whenever you have a collision between a small mass and a large mass, one thing always happens. The pinball goes flying, and the bowling ball continues on its original trajectory. Now, for the pinball, this is a traumatic event, right? Because trauma is the violation, the interruption of the pattern that we identify with. So we all have a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that says this is the right way. This is who I am, and this is the right way of doing things, right? But who we are and what is right for us collides at times with a group or with an energy pattern that has more mass, more money, more status, more physical size, more people belonging to the group, right? And when you have a collision, the law of mass is in play, right? No one in their right mind sees one person riding up on a horse and 10,000 people riding towards the one person in their horse in a cavalry battle with swords and says, oh, well, let's see what happens here, right? The identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being of the one horseman is going to be traumatized because it will be interrupted, it will be shattered, it will be battered. And the ego, the I that identifies with that pattern, is going to feel helpless, broken, terrified, powerless. That's what trauma is. The helplessness, the terror, the paralysis, the hopelessness. When the pattern that the I attaches to is broken. Now, as a result, in a sociopathic environment, because that is an environment that is required for a battle, right? In an empathic environment, the crowd asks the individual, how can we help? What's going on here? What do you need? So when there's a conflict between a large mass and a small mass, the empathic brain is not the primary operating system. It is the reptilian brain. And it is the reptilian brain that manages the fight, flight, freeze, and please protocol. Now, what this typically means is that the individual encountering a larger power pattern, a larger density of energy, runs. Okay. The small one runs to escape the trauma, to avoid, what's going on here? To avoid the trauma, right? Because when a violent interruption of our pattern occurs, we are traumatized. We fear for our survival. There is a small death and a greater fear of complete death, as we are reminded that we are small in a world with many things that are larger than we are, right? But in a supposed world of rationality, you see, the law of mass is not the law of intelligence, is not the law of honesty, for example, right? So in an empathic environment, an individual has a chance, if what they're saying is true and right and consistent with the group protocol, and the group is violating their own laws, the group is not doing what's right, the group is being dishonest, but there's an honest element in the group that doesn't want to crush the right path just because they're violating it. So in that situation, see, in an empathic cult dynamic, the larger group can choose not to trample over and utilize force, utilize mass, just because they're bigger, right? And so the individual ego that's holding its identity has to make a decision. Am I dealing with the reptilian brain in the group, or am I dealing with the rational brain, or am I dealing with the empathic brain, right? Because the sociopathic brain, the reptilian brain, plays out that it's fight what is smaller than you and that you can beat. It is run from what is bigger than you and that you cannot beat. And it is freeze when neither of those options are expedient. And it is please, asklick, a larger power source, when there is a likelihood of reciprocity. I'll help corrupt person get in power and stay in power, but they will make sure that I get a bit of the spoils, right? So in that dynamic, there's fear as the primary operating system. There's not respect, there's fear, or the respect is out of fear. But there's a collaboration. I'm not going to go against someone that could harm me. I'm going to try and please them, right? If it's unsure, there may be a testing, but once I establish, no, this person cannot be gone against and I cannot survive if I do, then I may move to freezing, running, or pleasing, right? And so this all makes sense, right? The law of mass, the reptilian protocol, etc. Nobody doubts that when the pinball hits this bowling ball, that the pinball is going to go flying. Nobody doubts that. My pen doubts that. Suddenly it won't write. But, that's what's going to happen, right? That's the law of mass. The law of intelligence is quite different. The law of intelligence says that the majority is always wrong relative to a distinct minority that is blazing the path forward. So what happens when you have an idea and a paradigm of righteousness, but you are in a reptilian environment, right? Let's say you're at a church and you have a conflict with the pastor. Now, in chauvinistic churches, that will be a male. So you have a conflict with the pastor, and the pastor has, let's say, 67% support within the congregation. The pastor has rank, plus resources with that rank, right? So the pastor has a fair amount of resources, including the fear of God. If you don't do this, God will be angry with you, all of that. But you as an individual think that your approach is better for the people, more consistent with the Bible, more consistent with what you believe is right. So now there's a tension. The pastor's saying we should do it this way. You're saying we should do it this way. But let's say you've been around enough to understand that the pastor is not 100% loyal to the Bible, the right path to rationality, right? You understand that there's some connection, right? The pastor isn't just violating the Bible randomly just because, right? So there is a connection. But you also understand that there are times, and this seems to be one of them, when the pastor has another agenda that is more important to him than being right, than the most direct path to the Bible, than the well-being of the members. He has another agenda that he's placing ahead of the three responsibilities, right? Because to be a pastor, you have to promise to serve God, not use God as your servant to serve your own well-being. You've got to promise to serve God. You have to promise to do what's best for your parish, your people. You have to promise to do what's right, to take the most direct path of supporting the Bible, the principles in it, etc., etc. So that's the responsibility, right? But you see, if the entire congregation, if the entire congregation doesn't want to have to get a new pastor, doesn't want to investigate it, doesn't want to not give the pastor the benefit of the doubt. After all, they're always saying he's a servant of God. We don't want to question God too closely. Then your body, as the individual, your body has a feeling. The kind of feeling that makes you want to run, that makes you want to freeze, that makes you want to ass lick, so as to protect yourself from a reptile that is posing as a friend but is not actually your friend, right? When the pastor is loyal to another agenda, maybe it's having sex with one of the parishioners. Maybe it's covering up embezzlement. Maybe it's the fact that he wants to play golf next Sunday. And what's being debated is, the time slot, and, what's good for everyone else would be if the pastor was available all afternoon next Sunday. But what the pastor actually wants to do is play golf or watch a football game or whatever it is that's more important to him than actually doing the best thing, the most biblical thing, than serving God by doing what's best for the parish, right? So there's a divergence of agenda, and the agenda that is divergence from the role is more important. It's not totally important. Maybe the pastor would rather give up the job and stop being a priest in order to fulfill that agenda. Or maybe it's if he can get away with it. Like no one else in the parish is pushing what's right for God and the church and the parish. No one else is doing that. But this person is, this one person who's committed to doing what's right by the Bible and what looks like the most sensible thing and what's best for the parish. And so there's a tension. Pastor, 67% support, rank, resources, speaker of God, says, I think we should close our services by noon or 11:30 on Sunday, and we should all personally reflect, right? Because if we're all personally reflecting, then he can go and do his golf game or whatever, right? If we're reflecting as a group and doing stuff as a group, then he can't do his golf game, right? He can't do his thing, right? So there's a conflict. And the question is, because all the words, all the surface stuff is saying this is all for God and let's have the conversation based on what's good for God. But the real conversation is, are you going to get in the way of something that's far more important than being a pastor or a Christian to me? Are you going to get in the way of my gambling, my golf game, my little fling on the side? Are you going to challenge my agenda that's more important to me than anything about this church? Right. The only reason I got this gig was because I wanted to have free time and this and that, and you're ruining that. Are you going to stand in my way? And if you do, what am I going to do from my position of rank that is going to make your life suffering while pretending to be in the name of God, right? And this is an uncomfortable situation because the body never lies. The body of the person is going to be frightened, is going to feel the undertow of the real agenda. The mind is going to be questioning the skewed logic, like, why are you using such skewed logic to avoid the obvious solution here? In fact, I'm using your logic, preacher, right? I'm using your logic about how we're stronger together and all that, and you're saying we should be broken up. Why can't we be stronger together next Sunday, right? Well, the Lord, why don't we do it? The Lord works in mysterious ways and we can be together next Sunday, right? So this is the tension, and what will often happen is that this semi-conscious mind that knows there is a lie going on here, but that knows that in that lie, the tension is coming from the betrayal that's coming from the lie. In other words, the preacher is betraying God, betraying his oaths, betraying the Bible, and betraying his parish. That's a pretty big betrayal, right? And preacher is denying that. And to preserve their rank, their power, their resources, that lie has got to be hidden, right? To preserve their role, their identity. The lie has to be hidden. But to preserve their agenda, the betrayal has to happen, right? So they want to preserve both. The identity of being a great priest and their agenda that makes them a terrible priest. They want both, right? And there's just one person that's kind of bringing that out into the open. Often, there is a good chunk of the group that doesn't want it brought out into the open. Because if the group says, yes, we know the preacher likes his gambling games and does this and that, we often see him out, golfing on Sunday, we know that. And we know that the preacher doesn't believe in the Bible and doesn't really put us first and is enjoying, the gig, the easy life in this role, right? We're a rich parish, good salary, not long hours, and, he is just not that into this whole setup. But he's okay. We feel comfortable with him. We know him. And he's not as bad as the last priest, and we don't want to have to find another priest who could be worse, right? And so we want to maintain the status quo. Well, that faction of the group is now turning with some hostility at the person who actually wants to follow the Bible, etc. And the body will feel this disparity in mass and also understand that we're in somewhat sociopathic terrain of betrayal, terrain of lies, terrain of schizophrenia. Well, the reason we say we're going to church is because we believe in all this, but really it's to maintain a comfortable thing. It's just a social thing. And we don't want to bring any of that out to the open. So one of the things that starts to happen as this is going on is perhaps a third of the group starts to feel like, the status quo would be better maintained if we got rid of this one person, right? If we could just get rid of this outspoken truth teller, then we could be hypocritical and pretend that we're not hypocritical. Preacher could go to his golf game. We could have more time next Sunday as well, but still call ourselves Christian and devout. And we wouldn't have this underlying tension and risk that every time there was this conflict, this person would speak out and to do the right thing. Now, we all need love and belonging. It's the third in the hierarchy of need. We need survival, we need security, we need love and belonging. It's a devastating thing for a parishioner to become the enemy of the pastor and a third of the congregation. Another third is going to be neutral, right? I don't really care, right? I see benefits in both. I'd like to play golf too, but I also see that this guy is actually much more in integrity with the Bible than the priest, right? And so, yeah, I see the problem, but I don't really have a side. And then there will be also a third of people that, or maybe 10% or whatever, 5% of people who actually really do care about the Bible and, and the dictates, and will side, if they are clear, they will side with the person that's doing the right thing, right? Well, even a third of people that are hostile towards you, that would like you to disappear, even a third of those people, it's an unstable, uncomfortable situation. It's unstable, it's uncomfortable, right? And we know that if we get into a head-on fling between God and his representative, we're not going to win. And the group, the undecided, and the ones that just don't want any hassle are going to side with the preacher. And most of the others don't want to go into a battle with the others. So we're going to be largely alone against a larger mass. But let's say we're really righteous. We have a lot of integrity. We believe in what we believe in, so we think it's the right thing. So we're going to maintain the focus verbally, right? But our body is not happy with the setup to be at war with 2/3 of the group. We can feel the impatience, the glances, etc., coming around us. And we know that we cannot survive a head-on collision with something twice, 3 times, 50 times bigger than we are, right? We can't survive that. We're the one that's going to go bouncing, not the group. And so what's at risk here is the identity. See, how can I be a righteous person who's cast out of the church? It's an inconsistent identity. Well, it's simple. You go to a corrupt church, and a corrupt church will cast you out for being righteous. But that's not the default assumption that people make. Why was I the only one cast out of the church? Why am I the only one who isn't welcome here when I care more about the Bible than any of these people? This makes no sense. It doesn't, right? You've got schizophrenia in the group. But challenging an entire group, like if you're really righteous and you believe that, most of your group is corrupt in a church, starting with the pastor, then the right thing to do is to call that out or leave the group. But if I leave the group, my survival, I get jobs from some of the people, my security, I've got people there in the church have my back, my sense of belonging. I belong in this church. I know people here. I don't know anyone else in the outworld. All of my human needs are threatened. traumatically with a collision between a superior mass, a small person and a group. And so this is a crisis of identity. It is a threatened trauma in which our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being is likely to be violated. And the question is, as a righteous person who would never consciously surrender and do the wrong thing, what do we do in this situation? And one of the things that we do is we self-sabotage. We cough when we try to speak. We find ourselves turning away and avoiding the person we would say that righteous thing to. We get sick suddenly and can't come to church. We say we have a presentation to make to the whole group and we forget our notes and look awkward and just apologize and sit down, right? In other words, we derail the collision, right? So if I really push this, my whole identity is going to be shattered. My belief in Christians. I mean, do you know what a big deal it is if you're a devout Christian and you go from believing that people around you who say they're devout Christians are actually devout, and then recognizing step by step that they're cowards, they're hypocrites, they're more unchristian than many of the people who don't go to church? You know how upsetting that is to your identity and what am I doing with these people? It's a massive collision of the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we've been holding. That's been delusional, that has facilitated the relationship. And this is the crisis. This is the crisis that an individual finds as their body tries to freeze, as their body tries to run, as their body tries to ass lick and ingratiate themselves with the corrupt power source. And their mind is saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But it is the body that obeys the law of mass. And it is the body that has the instincts that were outmatched. You see? We wonder, for example, why policemen treat beggars who need help on the street with contempt, with brutality, but show tremendous respect to a well-connected politician who happens to be a mob leader and egregiously harming the public. Well, see, the police officer is making two calculations. One is this against the law? Yes. But the other is, am I still going to have my job after this corrupt politician uses $10 million and secret blackmail connections with all of the judges to put me in jail and destroy my family? Those are two different calculations. And the awareness that this person has millions and millions of dollars that they can protect themselves and harm me, and I have very little. And this person has influential connections and I have none. And this person has rank that's high and I have rank that's low. That equation says that if we come together, I will be the loser. And understanding that, the politician expects me to back down, to treat him differently than I would someone who has no power to harm me, a homeless person. And so you've got two things. You've got the law of right and wrong and integrity and all that. And then you have the law of mass. And they're often in completely opposing positions, right? The law of what's the right thing is often pointing in a different direction than the law of mass. And one of the reasons for that is most people who are going to be chronic criminals in one form, that are going to chronically violate the rules, whatever they've been established to be, usually gather a dense form of energy to hurt whoever challenges them. Criminals are more likely to have guns, bombs, cash stashes, high-paid attorneys, getaway jets, getaway cars, bazookas, blackmail on various people, right? Because they know that the battle is coming because they're committing a variety of crimes. And so they're gathering a lot of energy. And then you have to decide whether it'll do more harm to the system to take the criminal down who is going to do all of this harm, blow up the neighborhood, race cars, take off in a jet, spill blackmail on various people in local government, etc., that they've bought out and all that. You have to decide that. And so that's the law of mass. So one of the things that highly ethical, righteous people, righteous just means that you have a sense of what's right and what's wrong, and you want to do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because your greed, your lust, whatever. One of the things that people who are disproportionately righteous, integrated, have more integrity than the majority of people around them often do, is self-sabotage, humiliate, and shame themselves in order to knock their position lower so that it will not be perceived as a threat. Because, we might be this size, and this will certainly slow a bowling ball down. And so we try and make ourselves really small. Now, we can make ourselves small by stuttering. We can make ourselves small by looking away, by talking in a low voice. I'm wondering if you really thought this through. As opposed to, hey, you're violating the group's trust, right? Can I have a word with you? You sure you want to do this, right? I'm going to make myself very, very, very small so it's absolutely clear that I'm not a threat to your reptilian brain. Now, we can become incompetent. We can make ourselves poor, for example. Keep our money small, keep our competence small. We can reduce our reputation. We can act in crazy ways so that people won't take us seriously. We can be a joker. We can be a clown. Nobody takes a clown seriously, right? We can form dependent relationships. We can do a variety of things that make us smaller in relationship with something that's bigger to subvert and avoid a battle we are afraid we will lose. Not necessarily in losing a given argument. If we are good at our argument and the other person is bad at their argument and it's a bad argument, we may win the argument. But when it becomes clear to someone who has a different agenda than we do, when it becomes clear that their agenda will continue to have sex with parishioners, to use public money, to fund their own businesses, whatever it is, when that agenda is stronger and they have that agenda. And when you have that agenda, that is your highest agenda, you've got to do everything you need to do to get the people who are in the way of that agenda out of your way. That means the honest people have got to get fired, have got to be killed, have got to be smeared, so that the landscape will be free for the slime agenda, for the personal agenda that is the violation of public and group trust. So, in order to avoid that collision and that crash, many highly ethical people knock themselves down in many, many ways repeatedly to avoid that head-on collision. In doing so, a part of them, the righteous part of them, may feel hatred or contempt that they are doing this. May feel worthless, like, I know this is wrong and I know that's the thing to do, but I won't do it. I'm a coward, right? And then I hate myself. So when I'm hating myself, when I'm contemptuous of myself, I don't love myself. But also, many people will create public attack, right? I'm going to do things that make me look bad publicly so that I am discouraged from going head to head, right? So I may be a better pastor. I may be more competent, more ethical. I may be a better politician, more competent, more ethical. But I don't want to be viewed as a threat. And so I humiliate myself publicly. I knock myself down. I trip over. I stutter. I do everything to stay small. And then I feel unlovable because nobody loves me. In a sociopathic group, you are respected if you're strong. You are treated with contempt if you're low rank or a loser. So by setting oneself up to be a loser, one can keep the threat levels low, keep the conflict at a low, and not have to deal with a collision of values and ethics, of identity. And so then we hold on to the identity of being a weak, pathetic loser, etc., and we're fine with that because it's avoiding the collision. No one in pursuit of an ulterior motive will say, that person's going to get in my way. I need to sideline them. I need to kill them. I need to blackmail them. I need to smear them. I'm just not a threat. And so this looks on the surface like we're being unlovable to ourselves. Why do I never say this? I know this more than that popular person, but I'm avoiding the confrontation. Why is that, right? And so it is both self-preservation and a lie, a story that we are unlovable. That's why we can't speak up, because we're unlovable, right? And we might believe the lie. And we certainly want other people to believe the lie. We're not lovable, so don't attack us, right? Now, this is also the case with sensitives, because sensitives, you can look at Elaine Aron's work on the highly sensitive person and do a search for HSP test. Sensitives feel the pain of collision, of conflict, much more than other people, so they can endure it less. They're more reactive. Their stimulation threshold is lower, so they're going to reach their maximum pain point where they need to withdraw from a conflict at all costs much faster than someone who's neurotypical. So for that reason, again, a fight is very important to avoid. And for many, quote, righteous, sensitive people that have a strong sense of right and wrong, it is traumatic to understand that much of their group is corrupt. It is traumatic to understand that the pastor, that the politician has an agenda that's more important to them than the well-being of the group, of their role. And that in a head-on collision, they will lose. And therefore, to willingly and participate in the group, knowing that to do so requires them to be dishonest, but their definition of self is to be truthful and to be righteous, this collision can't occur. And so there's a sublimating and a sabotaging as a way to protect the righteous identity of self and to protect the delusion that others are equally on that right trail, are equally committed. So the result can be seeming that we don't love ourselves, that we're sabotaging ourselves. Seeming that we are unlovable because if we're treated with contempt for playing weak and being weak, then we're taking on the projection of unlovability and contempt from others. And refusing to be strong and magnificent because it's outside of our image that we're comfortable with, because we don't want the head-on collision. And because we don't want to transition from what seems like a kind and empathic group into a group of backbiting saboteurs who suddenly thought we were, went from thinking we were harmless to thinking that we are a threat.